All right. Happy Wednesday, everyone. Thanks for joining Wednesday Night Clinic. We have our speaker tonight, Ron Rosenberg, who's going to talk to us about race starts. So I'm going to hand it over to him. Thanks very much, Ron, and all of you that have volunteered to give winter clinics. They've been absolutely fantastic. Hopefully, you can see we have started recording them, so you can go back and watch them. I'm trying to get the links in the weekly email that comes out as well. So again, thanks to everybody. It's heard a lot of good feedback on the program, and I'm going to hand it over to Ron.
Thank you, guys. Thank you very much. Thanks to Ken and Steph and Boris. They are our sail fleet captains for OIYC. You guys are just rocking it this year. I am so glad, and we are all so lucky to have you guys running our program because you're doing a great job. The enthusiasm over this winter is impressive. So thank you so much, you guys. So let's see, starting. So generally, I think it's safe to say that when most people think of starting a boat race, we tend to think about something stressful, something that brings on some anxiety, and the most challenging, difficult part of the race for many. So for me, when it's time to start a race, I want to reduce stress. I want to take a couple of deep breaths and just dial it down and clear my head so I can focus, not only just for my own benefit, but for my teammates as well. If I'm sailing double-handed and relying on just one other person, that's fine. It's just a moment to kind of connect and get ready to go, because things start to happen pretty quickly when you're preparing for the start of the race. And it's something that it's an important part of the race, right? Races can be lost right at the start of the race. You can't really win a race at the start, but you can get off the line in good shape and clear air. That's our goal. But the whole idea is just not to stress, not to do yourself any huge disservice, so you can go on and enjoy a great race. That's the whole idea. We can modify that strategy a little bit if it's the last race of your world championship and you're tied for first with another boat, or there's some different scenario. But for the most part, I'm going to just kind of speak generally towards what has worked and what will continue to work with our fleet here on West Sound. And we are just so lucky to have such a great fleet of good people who some are very experienced and very talented. Some are brand new to this. And it's important that we keep it all inclusive for everybody. And a big part of that is making sure everybody has a good experience. More importantly, we want to try to avoid anybody having a bad experience. Nobody deserves a bad experience, especially when it's something avoidable. And more often than not around the race course, it's going to happen at the starting line, when anxiety and stress tend to be a little higher than they need to be. So, like I said, for some people, getting ready for the start of the race, it produces stress, it produces anxiety, total brain cramp for some. And let's not be in that category. The most successful people in this sport, at any level of the sport, who consistently do very well at the start, they have patterns, they figure out what works for them, they modify it and adjust it. So tonight is about figuring out I'm going to present a couple different scenarios to you guys tonight. You can try them all at some point, but see if you can figure out which one of these techniques, I'll share 3 or 4 of them tonight, figure out which one works best for you, and then start practicing adjusting it and customize it, make it your own, custom tailor fit it for your start and for your team. And I'll talk a little more about how to kind of categorize these and how we can own each one of our own starts and make it our own. So for me, and for others that are willing to practice good boat handling and manage your race course and your strategy and your homework, and I have a whole pre-race routine that I've been using since I was a kid. I'm no longer a kid, but I kind of sail like one. And I've learned what works for me. I've learned what I love, and it fits me like a glove. So I'm going to share that with you. And I'm going to ask everybody just to kind of tweak it and modify it to figure out how you can make it work for yourself and for your team. Maybe it depends on the kind of boat you're on. So as your coach, I will tell you, there's something that I'm going to ask you. As I want you, your mission at every start of every race is to bore me. Your start should be so boring It should be no drama, no stress, no screaming, no yelling. It should actually be kind of this experience where it's you and the starting line and controlling the space around you. Um, Sounds difficult. Sounds, for some, the starts are just strictly chaotic, and sometimes that is because we allow them to be, or we force it that way. We don't have to. You can control your cadence at the start. You can slow down and sail at half speed before the start. You can have your sails luffing and flapping in heavy air, so you have to yell just 3 feet away to the person next to you to hear, or you can trim them in a little bit so they stop luffing and the boat's still sailing at half speed. And you can just talk in a normal voice to those around you, and the person calling time, or if everybody's looking at time, but if someone's calling time, make it easy for them to get the information to you. So if you're a mainsail trimmer or jib trimmer and your sail's flapping like crazy, just trim it in a little bit. The boat's not going to accelerate much, just to quiet the boat. It's kind of when I am at my best and I'm productive, it is quiet and calm and clear-headed. And so that's for me, that is the mental state I like to be in as I approach the start of a race. And for me, I will tell you right now, the most fun part of an entire boat race is the start. I love starting boat races. So as an overview, I'm gonna read a little bit off the handouts. Hopefully everybody's gone ahead and either printed out or snapshotted the handout that I put up. There's a lot of information there, but it's only going to take us 10 or 12 minutes to roll through it. So if you guys will bear with me, I'm going to do a little bit of reading. I'm going to do a little bit of insertion and ad lib and share a little more information. I'm going to ask that everybody, if you can, part of the reason for the handout is just to save your questions until the end. If we can just save them until we're done with the techniques and put all the information out there, then I'd be happy to entertain everybody's questions all night long, no problem. We can talk about rules, we can talk about whatever you want. So let's roll right into this now. And hopefully by now we've been on for a few minutes now. Hopefully everybody who's going to join is joined and on board. So starting right at the top, the goal of when I think about the goal of my average start of a race, day in and day out, it's not to port tack the fleet and cross everybody and high five my crew and go on and try to win the race. That's kind of a recipe for disaster. That's a high risk start and a low percentage start. That is the opposite of what I try to do about 95 or 98% of the time. When the overall regatta or event or championship risk management dictates that that's the smart move for me, then I'll do it. But it's not day in and day out. I don't take risks like that, especially not at the start. Like I said before, you can lose races at the start and you can get put way out of the race, or you can just keep yourself right in it and set yourself up for success up the race course. That's really what we're trying to achieve. Right. It's more than just what's going on in your head. It's about top quality execution. It's about excellent teamwork, communication, boat handling. These are all valuable assets. It comes from practice. If I jump on a boat with Boris and with Stephanie, and it's the first time the three of us have sailed together, and we say, right, that starts in 15 minutes, what should we do? We're going to start with a plan. We'll start developing a plan. Hopefully it happens well before that, but it's going to be our first time doing it. I'm of the mindset that when you're lucky enough to sail with regular teammates on a regular basis, by developing these patterns, we can all step into these patterns, and it's going to help us and make it easier and make it more normal and feel more comfortable and keep us in our comfort zones so that we're all thinking clearly and we're all ideally pretty close to on the same page without having to have these long paragraph conversations about it. Some of the very best sailing teams that I've been lucky enough to sail with or to coach use the fewest words, even at a start. Sometimes the boats are almost silent and it's just little phrases. We're gonna go for the high slow speed build. It's blowing 20. We're on a dragon in Perth, Australia, and the waves are pounding. And if it's Perth, it's probably blowing 30. And it's challenging for everybody. You're gonna talk about your high slow speed build, which is the technique you're going to try to deploy at the start. You're going to talk about which third of the starting line you like. We'll have done our start homework. We'll check for the favorite end. And as we get ready to go, there are very few words that actually happen if you've practiced this a few times with the same crew. So think about that next time you're out sailing, or when you go out training your crew or getting warmed up for a race. Try a practice start or two. And if there's a buoy out there, you can use the buoy and some transit on shore. Or if there's nothing out there, you can just say, hey, we're just going to do a practice acceleration here. Let's just stop the boat, slow down, count of 3. We're going to see how quickly we can accelerate. That kind of information on any given day, whether it's in West Sound, where we often have wind over water like we did last Sunday, 12 plus knots of breeze with almost no chop, wind over water, which makes it very easy to accelerate, very fast acceleration. That's the opposite if we go to San Diego or Marina del Rey and have huge chop and very light wind. That is water over wind is what we call that. Lots of chop, and you really have to struggle with what little breeze you have to get through it. It could take a week in a dragon to get up to speed in those conditions. So know your conditions and be thoughtful about that. So if I'm starting somewhere off Anacortes and it's tied against wind and it's choppy and it's a light air day, if I don't have time or I'm not organized enough to do a practice acceleration or two, I'm at the very least going to be thoughtful enough to say, okay, so what I need to do is I need to be prepared and thoughtful, and it's going to take me some time, probably 3 or 4 times as long to accelerate up to speed than it would if I were in West Sound and it's a nice day like last Sunday was and we were racing then. Is that making sense? Okay, so be thoughtful of your conditions. Ideally, you're going to get a couple of practice runs in there. So in my opinion, there are these simple steps that consistently will lead you to successful starting. And so keep in mind, as your coach, I talked about boring me, no drama, no letters. No letters means no touching other boats. In West Sound, I am super proud of our track record of all of our J-Pod group, the Martins. We have not had boats touch all winter long. It has been fantastic. We are going to keep that going. If we start to see somebody coming in with a little different mental approach and kind of the bull in the china shop, and someone gets a little too aggressive, they're going to win the award that I will give them. It is called the Golden Fender Award, which you will then get to duct tape across your bow for the next regatta. So keep in mind, I love that our boats don't touch, and we are going to do everything we can to keep that going. The mutual respect is very high, and it's a fantastic situation for learning. Kimmer, you want to help me out? Come here. Okay. My whole family sails. This is Bates. He's the newest member of our family, and he gets to go sailing in the next week or two for the first time. You all have seen Hudson, his big brother, out there. But anyhow, this is a little, this is his introduction. So he'll have his chance to come sailing with us too, but he knows the rules. He knows boats don't touch, even muddy paws. So, the goal is a good start. The goal is, so if I come off the line and I can sail in my lane for 2 to 3 minutes, 2 to 3 minutes going straight on starboard tack, that's a win. That's a great start. That's all I want. That start should allow me to execute my game plan, and it should allow me to do very well in that race. And it should allow me, if I consistently do that through the regatta, to win the regatta. So the start I'm looking for, to say it in different words, is just a clear lane for 2 to 3 minutes. It's that simple. I don't have to be the bow closest to the line when the gun goes off. In fact, often I prefer not to be the bow closest to the line when the gun goes off. I prefer to be a couple of meters or a couple of yards back from the line, and I prefer to have more speed than the boats around me, so that a minute or two after the race, 100 yards, 200-300 yards up the race course, I am the bow forward, and I am in control of my space on the water and the boats around me. I'm not out there trying to wipe out the boats to windward, wind check anybody, nothing like that. Those don't generally work very well, and certainly not if you have any longevity in this kind of a class. So I just mentioned something. It's not necessary to clobber the boat to windward in order to get a good start. all that accomplishes is that you ruin someone else's race. And instead, just be sure to get yourself focused and positioned properly for a good start. And I think you're going to enjoy how fun and easy this can be on a regular basis. Be sure your boat is fully tuned up and powered up. Be sure your backstay is set before the start. So how many times have you come off the start line and you trim on, and the last time you went upwind was about 20 minutes ago, and you're a little surprised that the wind's now 5 knots windier and everybody's struggling to pull a little more jib hired on or pull a little backstay on or set the boat up for more wind than you were prepared for because nobody had eyes up the race course checking. I guarantee you that the boat next to you, who may have been set up very well, rather than pulling strings and trying to deal with getting the boat perfectly set up at that point in time, if you're already set up and you know how you want to be going and you know what wind to expect and what chop level or flatness of the water level to expect, you're off and running. So I think that's a very important thing that I hope everybody takes away. And it's something we see here in West Sound in the very tippy J70s that we often sail. We'll come off the line in a little more of a puff or a lull because just 2 or 3 minutes either direction, and the wind can be a few knots lighter or heavier. And if it's lighter and someone comes out, realizes that, makes the adjustment before you do, you're probably going to get shot out the back, and that's going to turn what could have been a good start into a bad start. So the last thing you want to do with about that final 1 or 2 minutes to go is look up the race course, compare what you see on the water and the wind and the water and the wind to what you most recently sailed in. Is it the same? Is it more? Is it less? And typically what my habit is, especially here on West Sound, is if it's not looking windier than the last time I was just racing upwind and tuned up, I'm going to just, with 1 or 2 minutes to go, have the wherewithal to think about that and ease my backstay a couple of inches so that I come off the line a little more powered up than I think I might need. I'd rather come off the line a little overpowered than underpowered in general. So just absorb that point that I just shared with you, because that is the difference between if you go to a J70 World Championship and there's 100 boats, maybe 10 of the boats will have done what I just talked about. I guarantee that at least 80 or 90 of those boats will come off the line and someone says, we need more of this, we need more of that. And you're messing around with boat speed rather than saying, good job, keep pressing, we're higher, we're faster. That's what you need to be focused on off the line. Be in race mode from when you start your final acceleration a couple seconds before the gun goes off for that first 2 minutes, because that could be the most critical time in the race. I guarantee 2 minutes, the last 2 minutes of the beat or the last 2 minutes of the last leg of the course, it's not going to matter. That half boat length or that boat length that you're struggling for right there is not going to matter. The most critical part of the boat race is that first few hundred yards. Just like how those who have sailed with me often realize, before the first tack of every race, that first tack is the most important tack of the whole race. Okay, deep breath, here we go, we're off the line in good shape. Okay, those guys are tacking, we're getting ready to tack. Okay, focus on a really nice tack. It's the most important tack of the whole race. You nail that first tack, you get across the boats you need to, and you're in great shape. You flub that first tack, and now you maybe can't cross one boat, and now you're ping-ponged back going the other direction, and your race strategy falls apart. I know we've all been there. I certainly have. So just be thoughtful about how you're approaching these things. It's why I asked that everybody take a look at the notes. That's why I wrote them up for you, is so you can kind of refer back to them or put a little highlighter on something like that. But have your boat tuned up and ready. Starting, I'm at the bottom of the first page. Starting, I believe consistency is the key to successful starting. I've talked about that. It's my intent to help you create these healthy patterns for your pre-start techniques tonight. It's my goal to put you in firm control of your starts by helping you to control your surrounding space and manage and be aware of those boats that are immediately around you. That's not taking out the windward boat next to you. That's just I want to teach you to manage your space tonight so that you're in control and you can keep yourself from getting rolled by the boat to weather. And you can start to build a little bit of a gap to leeward so that if you decide you want a little more space and you want to put your bow down to accelerate either earlier or use that space later on, a minute or two into the race, if you want to go faster forward, then you have space to put your bow down. I'm going to help teach you some strategies to keep that gap to leeward better than you probably have in the past. And that's especially true for a lot of these boats we call narrow keel boats, which do not include a dragon. A dragon is not a narrow keel boat. A dragon is a long keel boat, but a J70 has a tiny little narrow keel, unlike a J24, unlike a Martin 242. Those are boats with pretty healthy keel profiles, and those boats don't slide the water quite as quickly. A J33, not so quickly. They hold their gauge on the line pretty well. But these newer boats, if you're not familiar with sailing, the J111 or the J99 or the J70 or the Melges boats, they all have very long, slender, narrow keels. And as soon as you put the bow down or you sheet the sails on, the first thing the boat does is jump sideways to leeward. It slides sideways on you until you get some forward flow going through the water. Usually it takes 1.7, 1.9 knots through the water in any wind condition to get enough flow going on both sides of the keel to add some grip so the boat starts going forward rather than sliding sideways into the boat to leeward of you. So there are a couple of simple common starting approaches. Let's get right into these different approaches. The first approach I didn't even write down because I never want anybody here to try it. So that one is one that we've seen everybody do, especially in dinghies. Lasers are notorious for this, where they will rush up to the line with 1 or 2 minutes and stake out their space, set up camp, and they're nailing stuff into the water. And it's like, this is my space. And they stick their booms all the way out there. Some turn their boat sideways to the line, thinking that gets more space. And then they look behind them to see who is going to be the first aggressive boat to try to shark in and hook them and push them up to the line. So what tends to happen in those fleets, and should not happen in our fleet here, is, again, what you don't want to do is rush up to the line and park, wait for the gun to go off, or the last 10 seconds, sheet in and go. And again, the reason that does not work in a fleet like this in J70s or in Martin 242s is because these boats, they all go sideways a little too quickly through the water, that as soon as you apply pressure and some force on the sails. So that is why it's not a start I recommend. If you do try that enough, you will learn eventually. If you're a slow learner, you'll learn eventually. It doesn't work very well, because trying to go from 0 to full speed in any of the boats that we race with here on West Sound takes longer than just a couple of seconds. These are not your garden variety Ferraris where you jump on the gas pedal and they take off. So I do not recommend the rush up to the starting line, sit and stake out your spot, unless you're sailing a laser and unless you're very good at accelerating that laser. So the three that I will recommend tonight, and I'm going to go in the order of my own personal, reverse order of my own personal love of starting techniques. The first one that I think is okay, especially if you're more of a novice, more of a beginner, and not tons of experience in the specific boat you're here racing. So the Vanderbilt Start. You probably all heard of this. It's a famous old America's Cup style start that Mr. Vanderbilt himself used to do. Effectively, you begin on the start line. You have the start line, and you would broad reach down down what would be the upwind starboard tack lay line. So let's say at 2 minutes, if the start is the very top corners of our screen here, tell me if I'm doing this right or if I'm doing this backwards. So is this the starboard side of your screen right now? No, that's the port. That's the left. Okay, that's the pin end over there. Pin end, starboard end. Okay. All right, so I am backwards. Okay, so enough with the hands. I'll talk you through it. If you're going to start towards the starboard end of the line, the Vanderbilt Start is when we're at, say, 2 minutes, you would reach downwind on the same line of your upwind starboard course. Okay, so you go downwind for, let's say, 50 seconds, giving you 20 seconds to execute a nice smooth tack and get back on course so you can come back up towards that starboard end. Does that make sense? So you're going to go away, you're going to reach away from the line, you're going to note what your knot meter says. Maybe it says 6, 7, and you're ripping down the line, and at 50 seconds, a minute after 50 seconds, or let's see, that would be a minute 10. If we started at 2 minutes, a minute 10, you tack around and you head right back the same direction, trimmed on, trying to somewhat match your speed. that you use your outgoing downwind speed using back on the close haul or close reach course you're on. And in theory, that should get you back to the start line at about the time you want to be there. Sounds good. When there's nobody else on the starting line, it works pretty well. When you add a few more boats, it is not nearly as effective, and it tends to not work very well. So you can give that one a try if you want, but that is one. If I'm out there on a big boat, we sailed Le Rev, a Beneteau 45 Oceanus, and on Le Rev, those were the first couple of starts that we actually did in light air. We're just reaching away at 3 knots, tack around and reach back, and it actually generally worked okay. Of course, if it's somewhere there's current or something else, you have to factor all that in. But in general, before we got to know the boat really well, that was not a terrible way to start. And we were working with a team of, for the most part, relative novice sailors. So that was an okay time to deploy the Vanderbilt Start. Let's move on to one that I love, and that is some of you who have sailed with us over the winter, and we sailed in some really heavy air races. You probably saw us execute a high, slow speed build approach. What I love about this is it's quiet, it's controlled, minimal opportunity to foul other boats or to be fouled. It's a very clean way to execute a start, especially in heavy air. To be able to set up on your preferred lay line. Let's say you want to start in the middle of the line. So you'll just take that starboard lay line angle. Maybe you're going to use a transit off the shore, but you have an idea of what the lay line is to the middle of the line. And you're going to set up maybe a 50 yards back, or 10 boat lengths, something like that. And at 2 minutes, you could trim on full main sheet, jib sheet, everything all the way trimmed in. And if you've practiced this and you're a good enough helmsperson to keep your boat going forward, and again, in the J70, it's about 1.7, 1.8 knots is enough for the keel to grip, and the boat won't slide sideways very much. And the boat's under total control. I'm not sailing with a full jib. I'm actually sailing the boat as slow as I possibly can and still maintain control. Let me say it again. I'm trimmed up upwind, sails are in, jibs in, mains in, everybody's hiked and sitting on the rail. We are all set to go at 1.5 minutes, 2 minutes to the start. And all I'm doing as the driver is luffing enough of the jib to keep the boat going as slow as I possibly can. And if you're really good, you'll have it under 2 knots. If you're not quite as good, maybe it's half or 2/3 of your upwind boat speed. And that's okay too, but you just need to account for that and try it a few times so you know how many boat lengths back off the line you prefer to be at 1 or 2 boat lengths. If you have a boat with a big Genoa, J33 is an example. A Dragon's a great example, super efficient way to start a Dragon. Anything with a large overlapping jib, even a J24, you can trim everything on so that when the gun goes off, you're not ripping along on a close reach while everybody else is going upwind, making it really hard for somebody to finish grinding that jib in. Okay, so if you sail with a big overlapping jib, that's probably going to become your favorite start. High, slow speed build, and you can use that however you want. Anytime you want to step on the accelerator, you put the bow down and the boat will take off at its own acceleration rate, which after a few practices, you should know what that is in that given condition. Okay, high, slow speed build approach. Don't forget about that. Give that one a try with your team sometime. Again, the bigger overlapping jib, the more fun you're going to have with that one. It's effective. The one that I probably use the most, my go-to, I'm going to call it the port tack approach. Really what it is, I'm about to describe it to you, but it is a very simple circuit. It's a triangle, and I use the same pattern. People that sail with me or that I get to sail with or work with on more than a rare occasion will know this is my favorite way to start, and I will help people figure out what the right blend of this pattern is for their sailing style. Here's what I mean by that. If I am, so let's just start at 2 to 4. I'll follow the notes first, and then I'll give you some, I'll kind of diagram it out a little bit. So the pre-start positioning, I call it the prowl. This is when you've just jibed onto port tack. So if I want to start on the starboard third of the line, you'll hear me, I always divide the starting line into thirds. So I'm either at the left third, the middle third, or the right third. So let's pretend for this instance, we're going to start on the right third of the line. For you, I think it's right third. So right third of the line. And to do that, I'm going to start all the way over at the port end of the line. Here in West Sound last Sunday, I think we did 10 practice starts and then 3 awesome races on top of that. There was not a single start that we did not deploy this kind of a start, but we varied it just a little bit each time and we got better each time. Those practice starts that Ken and Steph ran were so valuable for us. So at about 3 minutes, this is how we did it last Sunday. At 3 minutes, we were just jibing onto port, usually just a little past the pin. So outside the entire starting box. The starting box, by the way, is the starting line, defined by the 2 lay lines from on starboard tack lay lines to the pin and the starboard end. So the reason that's called the box is because you have to start somewhere in that box on those lay lines if you're going to start the race without tacking or start the race in good shape. So when people refer to the starting line box, that's what they mean. Starting line and then the 2 starboard lay lines, to the pin and the boat. So 3 minutes, we were jibing somewhere past the pin, usually 2 to 3 boat lengths past the pin. That's to the left of the pin, onto port tack. We would manage our speed and we would think about our distance. So sometimes we were going faster on that port tack so coming from the pin end down, aiming towards a point that for us was about 8 or 10 boat lengths to leeward of the starboard end of the line, right? Our goal is to start starboard end of the line. So we're looking for a point, an approximate point, about 10 boat lengths down off that starboard end. And if we come in really fast, let's say too fast, and we start to get ahead of ourselves and we start eating up too much ground and we realize we're going to be very early when we do tack onto starboard for that final 10 boat lengths, then we're talking about this already and we're coming a little fast. So either we slow down or we bear away and turn further from the line. Okay, the reason we do that is because by bearing away and turning away from the line, we lengthen that starboard tack approach. Okay, we'll call that the final approach. So again, the prowl is that port tack reach where you're coming from outside the pin, aiming back down below the starboard end. And again, you can manage your time and distance with the speed of the boat, trimming the sails in and out, furl up the jib if you want, whatever you like, or you can just adjust your course. And if you feel like you're late and you're a little behind and you're a little nervous about that, you just head up a few degrees while you're on port tack on that prowl, and that shortens your runway on starboard tack. So the angle that you return on that prowl is critical to your time and distance calculation. Is that making sense? Did I confuse anybody badly on that? Want me to review that, or are we good? Good there. So that's the prowl. So at about 3 minutes last Sunday, we were jibing and we were reaching along, trying to figure out the right angle, the correct angle. We were coming back on port tack. When we're on the prowl, keep in mind, it's critical to maintain your freedom. You might have noticed last Sunday that every one of those practice starts and every one of those races, I was sailing with Mike Brevick. He had me on board 372, and we were being very aware of where the other boats were. To me, 3 boats qualify as a pack. And if there's a pack of 3 boats overlapped and kind of bunched together, it's funny, before the start, it seems like the boats have magnets because they always seem to bunch together before the start. I am the guy that always wants to be away from the pack on the race course and before the start. So I try to avoid packs. The reason I do that is that if 3 boats are reaching down on port tack together, and let's say I'm in the middle and I'm sandwiched, I have to luff the boat to windward if I want to be able to tack, and I certainly can't push the boat to leeward, down, or jibe. So my options are limited and my hands are tied. I can't execute my game plan if I have boats sandwiching me or overlapped on either side of me. So that's a really important point. That's why I have the notes there saying maintain your freedom. If you've ever raced J24s on Leshai with the fantastic current world champion actually sails out of there, fantastic, extraordinary, talented sailors. There are typically 25 of them. I coach a bunch of those guys and gals, and they use a small starting line, and it is mayhem on the start line with big overlapping jibs, and there is barely room for everyone. We're packed like sardines, and I work so hard to stay out of the fray. We call it off the super highway, because everybody reaches back and forth right in that little 2 boat length zone between the start line and just a couple boat lengths down. Everybody loves to swim in that lane, and it's a very crowded space. So if you ever see me sailing on that fleet, as I do often in that scenario, or if you're in a fleet like that, say Martin 242 North America, just something like that, I would encourage you not to travel in that very busy lane. Pull over to the shoulder down here and travel just 1 or 2 boat lengths further down. Stay out of the fray. And then you can watch things develop, and you can see things develop. And best of all, you can tack when you want, you can jive when you want. You're in control of your destiny. That is what's most important about maintaining your freedom that way. So hopefully everybody gets that concept. For me, I get annoyed, and I really key in if I see another boat overlapped with me or close back on my stern quarter while I'm on that port tack prowl. Because if somebody is there, I don't want to have a conversation with them before I want to execute what I want to do, if I want to tack or if I want to jibe. So the more distance I have, the less I have to worry about. If I'm stuck in a pack of boats, I simply can't execute and do what I want to do. And I'm sure everybody's been there before, where you are set up for a nice start and okay, let's tack to the line. Oh, we have 3 boats overlapped to windward. Hey, you guys tacking soon? And it doesn't happen. And then before you know it, you're over the starboard ley line and you're in deep trouble. So by maintaining your freedom, you will never be at someone else's beck and call that way. You can be in full control. So think about these things. It's easy to talk about. It's even easier to forget about before the start of the race. So the notes are here just to kind of put a little circle around maintaining your freedom. You will find starting so much more enjoyable if you're able to do that. So control the speed of the entire game. We talked a little about that, but the 2 important points, you'll hear me mention them at least one more time tonight. In light air sailing, when we're struggling for speed and we have boats sailing all back and forth before the start line, the wind's trying to get through there and it feels extra light and the wind goes over the whole group as if it's a whole building. Do yourself a favor in light air. And it's worth circling this. I think I put it in bold, but in light air, sail around the last 3 minutes of the start, sail full speed. Sail the boat full speed, get comfortable sailing the boat full speed, get comfortable approaching the starting line at full speed. That is going to sound super scary to a lot of you who have never done it before, because usually we approach the starting line very slowly, trying to figure out when we jump on the gas pedal. Here's the whole trick to getting great light air starts. Get good at time and distance, going full speed on starboard tack in light air. If you do that, you will come into the start line at a consistent speed, hopefully fast, and you'll have momentum to sail on either side through bad air, whatever you need to do. But you don't have to focus all your energy on the time and distance calculation, trying to go from 0 to 60, which is a really challenging thing to do. And that's how we focus most of our brain power in light air, is trying to gauge that final acceleration. So in light air, give it a try. It takes some practice. The first time you do it, you're going to be about 6 boat lengths over early because it's going to feel so unnatural. But if you really think about it and get good at it, you can come in on your port approach, tack with 3-4 boat lengths below the line with the right amount of speed in a larger boat. J24 heavier boats, J24s and larger. J111 is a great boat for this. And J99, you tack in there, and your momentum will carry you at a consistent speed until you finish your tack and your sails fill, and you can reaccelerate that last little bit. But your acceleration calculation, that mental calculation, that formula, which is complex, it becomes simple because you're already at speed. So light air, try starting with full speed. Take some practice. You will love it once you get the hang of it. You will not love it until you get the hang of it. In heavy air, just the opposite. Heavy air, consider sailing around at half speed, half throttle. Jib rolled up if you have that option, great. A quiet boat, so we can talk in voices like this, and you can hear the person calling time or saying, hey, you see that boat over there, and your visibility is better. When we have heavy air and sails out flapping and luffing, not only are we not seeing most of the picture that we need to see, but we're not thinking clearly because all we hear is noise from sails. or people trying to yell things at us because we can't hear over the sails. So keep the boat quiet, half speed and heavy air. You will love me for that, because that is one of the greatest tips I've learned in heavy air over my lifetime, and I use it every time. I think it people that I sail with, I'm sure, are tired of hearing me say that and just saying half speed. Isn't it great? Just half speed and heavy air. Okay. And again, be consistent. And then as you do your final tack, the momentum can take you around. And then if you're already going half speed, it's pretty easy to go from half speed to full speed. Okay. So I just want to share some of that with you. In heavy air,
Hey,
I
Ron.
never, yes,
Ron, I have a quick question.
yes.
And this might be obvious to everybody else. How do I go half speed in heavy air with full sails?
Good question. That sounds like Kurt. Is that Kurt?
That is Kurt.
That is Kurt. Thanks for joining us, Kurt. So Kurt's one of these guys in the awesome J24 fleet in Leshai, who will soon be up here sailing with us in West Sound. So great question, Kurt. The trick is ease both sails out just the right amount. So in other words, you're going to luff the front half of both sails, but don't let the leeches luff and flap really loudly. So even with your big Genoa on the J24 and the big main, if you just let them out about halfway, to me, that is the way to do it. Okay. So I hope that makes sense. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay. It's worth a try. The goal is a silent boat, so the sails aren't flapping and everybody can hear each other, and we can literally just talk in this kind of a voice tone and strategize together. And it's a big advantage because most other boats can't communicate the way you're communicating on your boat. It's really quite a huge advantage. So a quiet boat, half speed's great, and the whole and it's something to practice again. So in heavy air, half speed, quiet boat, big advantage. Let me move off of that. Executing the drive. So this is the part where once you're committed to your preferred, let's say the starboard 1/3 of the line, if you are committed to that, and remember to avoid the packs and find the gaps in your race course. So avoid the packs, find the gaps. That's an important thing to just remember in general, but especially around the starts. Consider which side of the pack you want to start on. Does everybody know what I mean by that? So if I'm going to start on that starboard 1/3 of the line, and let's say I'm doing my port approach and I have a decision to make. I'm either going to tack before the pack of boats, and the packs of boats generally will form around 2 minutes, certainly by 1.5 minutes. With our J70 fleet last Sunday, with 7 or 8 boats we had out there, I could see where everybody was going to try to start or try to be when the gun went off at about 1.5 minutes, even though no one was there yet. So try to kind of watch things develop at the starts. The last 5 minutes of a start is a fascinating thing to watch. And it's just this dance. And in light air, you can usually tell even before the 5-minute gun where everybody's going to start. So be aware. And that's that kind of open your mind, absorb all the information you can from all your senses, and your crew use their eyeballs too. And that's something that we should always try to think about, especially from that 5 minutes to 2 minutes. Figure out where the pack is going to be. I will not start in the pack if I can avoid it. I will always try to start away from the pack, and I'm going to try to pick this. So what I'm thinking about on that port approach, and I say avoid the packs, look for the gaps. I'm looking for the least traffic. So traffic control is top of mind. And I'm also thinking, do I want the left side of the course or the right side of the course? That's the time to make sure someone on your boat is aware of your game plan. And we'll talk more about that in a moment. But it's really critical that if you know you want to go to the left side of the race course, here's the tip: start to the left of the pack. You can start in the starboard 1/3 of the line, but if you're going to start near a pack, you need to start on the side of that pack that will help you execute your game plan the first 5 minutes of the boat race. Does that make sense? Okay. Right. So which side of the pack you want to start on? That's an important one. I ask myself that question right there while I am on port tack, as I'm about to tack onto starboard, picking my area to start. So the lane game is something, it's a phrase I use. So the prow is on port tack, then the lane game kicks in, and that's sort of the 1 to 2 minutes. It could be 30 seconds to about a minute and a half, typically, where we're going to be tacking onto starboard. So I have this minute plus on my hands, and a lot of other boats are already on starboard at that point. So now let's just assume all the boats around us are on starboard. We call it the lane game because, in fact, yeah, so 2 minutes to 15 seconds to the gun. You're generally, you tack in an appropriate area that would line you up on starboard tack with your preferred zone of the starting line, that windward's third we're talking about. And by now you've committed to one side of the pack or the other, and you're within your zone. So as you slide into your preferred gap on the start line, let's say we just tacked early into leeward of that pack. You guys with me? So we slide into our gap. We're going to want to consider our speed relative to those around us. This is a really important relative observation, relative one boat to the next. So if you are ever slower than those around you, then you have to be aware that you are vulnerable on all three sides. You're vulnerable to boats to windward rolling over you and taking your wind. You're especially vulnerable to slightly faster boats to leeward that are just able to hold and grip themselves in the water. Their keels will grip better because they're going faster. Whoever loses grip first or slows down to a certain number, say 1.7 knots, will slide sideways faster. You don't want to be that boat and lose control and slide into that boat to leeward of you. So again, it's a relative concept. So if you're slower, you've got to be aware you're vulnerable on all three sides. If you are slightly faster than those around you, which is what I strive for, with one exception, I don't strive for that when it's high, slow speed build kind of a start. So if it's windy and I'm executing high, slow speed build, I generally don't want to be faster than the boats around me, but it doesn't matter. As long as my keel has grip, I'm happy and I can position myself. If I am executing this kind of port approach start that I love and that we did all day Saturday, last Sunday, then I want to come in and approach just a little bit faster with a touch of a speed edge over the boats around me. So that if we both, let's say there's a boat to leeward and a boat to windward of me, and I happen to come in right in the middle, hopefully there's some room, but even if it's tight, whoever slows down the most first is going to fall away. And if the leeward boat falls away, that's great. So if I'm faster than the leeward boat, even nudging forward, that's great. And I'm going to use that speed to try to build my gap to windward. Okay, build my gap to windward so that I have space to leeward when I want to use it to bear away to accelerate. If I do not come in with a little more speed than the leeward boat, or as Kai Verno, 13-year-old Kai, did this a couple of times beautifully. He came in real fast to leeward and stuck it up there pretty high. And he got pretty close to us and he closed up that gap really nicely. And once he just sheeted on and did his own high, slow speed build and sailed away and left us in the dust. That was beautiful, beautiful execution of that. However, it was a good reminder to me on a practice start, by the way, that we had Mike and I had a conversation. That's why we cannot afford to come into the line on starboard with less speed than those around us, because we are too vulnerable if a boat to leeward comes with more speed. Okay, hopefully that resonates. And I'm sure if we think back to our recent starts, we've all been caught by that leeward boat coming a little hotter and being able to kind of work over the windward boat. So where was I? There I'm at so the faster you approach the line, the easier it is to manage. Oh, the faster you approach the line, the easier it is to manage acceleration. That's what I wanted to say there. And that's why I have the faster in capital letters under final acceleration. The faster you approach the line, full speed and light air is a great example. The easier it is to manage that final acceleration, because you minimize the importance of that final calculation, that final, how do I accelerate in that condition, okay? In summary, the two basic rules to follow when starting: in light air, full speed or as close to it as possible. This allows us to sail through any bad air, minimize the importance of the final acceleration. In increasingly heavy air or medium air with flat water, as we had last Sunday, consider using half speed or 3/4 throttle on your final approach in order to maintain control of the boats around you and help accelerating to your target speeds as easy as possible. So I hope that by sharing with you three different techniques of starting, that makes sense and gives you something to think about. Because if you're not deciding, if you and your team are not clear on which technique you're going to deploy the next upcoming start, then you're probably just sort of making it up or ad-libbing. I think Robin and Jimmy are on the phone call, that start. And we want to come in with a basic plan, and try to execute that plan. And then if you continually do that, if you're lucky enough to be sailing with us here on a Sunday, we'll do a few practice starts, we'll do a few races, and by the end of the day, you've done 10 or 15 starts. And we get so much better at this so fast by that repeating and making these little mistakes on the practice starts and trying to fine tune it. But more importantly, realizing, okay, we're pulling the trigger a little too early here, or we need to adjust our time and distance a little bit more, or let's slow the boat down if it's breezy. So just think, these are, I try to provide you with 4 pages of thoughts and suggestions that you can now pick and choose what works for you or what you'd like to try, and give it a try. Before the next time you go sailing and hit a start line, just review these and maybe mention a couple of these with your crew, or share the whole thing with them if they're not afraid of a lot of reading. But give it a try, because I think that is pretty important and meaningful, because it really will help you come up with your own, customize your own game plan. So let me move on to the sort of the last big section. And I'll tell you, I will talk about rules a little bit too. And that's a pretty simple conversation, and I've got some great tools to play with on that one. But pre-start checklist is where we're at. I think that's halfway down page 3, if anybody is following along. One of the real keys to setting yourself up for success is simply to follow a checklist, a pre-start checklist. Even the J24 that won the Worlds at this last J24 Worlds in Miami, Keith Whittemore and his team, he's a local Seattle guy. I've been coaching his teams for years. They are a fantastic, very smart, high-level group, and they still have a printout of a checklist just like the one you have here to remind them of certain things. It's customized a little bit because maybe they have heavier battens and lighter battens, and so we customize the checklist. But make this checklist your own, and I'm just going to kind of run through it quickly with you. But I do rely heavily on this, and it's a general sample that I think works best for the West Sound group here. Until you get really comfortable with it, I would encourage you to stick it in a Ziploc bag or laminate it and just tape it to the front of the cockpit so you can kind of follow it along, because otherwise you're trying to remember, what was I supposed to do at 12 minutes or 15 minutes? And it's kind of hard to remember. So customize it a little bit, especially if you have a boat where you can have different jibs and you might, sail selection, things like that. So have all that on there so that when the 5-minute gun goes off, you're not deciding if you have the right jib or not, because that's a recipe for disaster. So yes, this list is organized sort of in reverse chronological order. So it's your prior time to the start. So 15 to 25 minutes, I've gone upwind, I've gone downwind. I like to get to a start. If I'm out there and if it's a real race, even if it's a Sunday race here, I'm on the race course an hour early. I love sailing in any weather, in any condition. If I'm on the water, I'm a happier person than when I'm on shore. I love to get out there early, even if it means a little less sleep. So at any sailing we do here in West Sound, I want to be out there early. Hello, Rocky. I see Rocky up there on the screen. And then if it's somewhere at a championship, I'm typically out there with a group of boats that I want to tune with, that I have hand selected, that I have invited out to join us for an early tune-up session. And we will just sail upwind like the first wave, as if we're the first wave of a start. But we'll be out there an hour early. Enjoying the day, getting the feel for it. What's the water like? What's the wind like? What's the day going to be like? Gosh, it's pretty warm. The breeze isn't that dense. We've got, we're set up for flat 8 knots of breeze, but it's such a warm day and the breeze is soft. We need to really power up. So those are the things we're talking about. And how's our rig tune, and getting the boat set up for those conditions, and thinking about how we want the boat to come off the line when the gun goes off. So upwind, downwind speed check in the specific conditions that we're racing in. Get a handle on the wind, your compass headings, ballpark ley lines. In a place like West Sound, even with as shifty as it is, I like to do ley lines with trees and mountains and use all the surrounding views that we have and try to talk about compass headings work fine too. They're just harder for me to remember because the wind shifts around here so quickly and so often. So ballpark ley lines at 10 minutes to go, it's you know, we're done talking about what happened in the last few days in our lives, and we're really kind of focused on the race and getting in our zone. Sail selection is done, rig tune is done. We simply don't mess with shrouds within about 10 minutes to the start. Unless you have a really good reason or something is way off forecast or something goes very wrong, and then you might see us winding on shrouds on and off up to the 5-minute gun. But I'll tell you, it's not something I try to have all that stuff done and locked in at 10 minutes. I want to be focused on my start the last few minutes of the race, not are we at the right rig tune or have the right jib. 8 to 15 minutes, somewhere in there, we're talking about our process strategy, the wind, the tide, the tactical discussion. That's kind of an ongoing theme. It starts at either the night before or breakfast, and we do a morning briefing. What kind of a day are we expecting? So that's an ongoing theme. We never stop talking about that until about 5 minutes. So 8 to 15 minutes, we're all on the same page on that. The whole crew is part of that discussion. So we're all on the same page, and even the coach, right up until the 5 or 10 minute gun, whatever works for that team. So we're talking strategy. 7 minutes, we back down for weeds. If we're lucky enough to be in a J70, we just pull the kelp cutter and cut whatever might be on there. And then, of course, check the rudder after you do that, because usually what you've just released from the keel goes right to the rudder. So be sure to check that. And then the initial decision comes at about 6 or 7 minutes, assuming the starting line has been set and we've done all of our homework. And I know which end of the line is favored. So by 7 minutes, I have a good handle on my tactical game plan. And I'll say that, and for the whole beat, probably for the run too. So I know what I want to do at 7 minutes before the start. If no other boats were out there and nothing changed based on what I've learned over the last hour that I've been out there sailing around, I know which way I'm going to go. I know I want to go right early, or maybe I want to protect the left side up the top of the beat if I'm here at West Sound on a standard southerly, but I have my game plan fairly nailed down by 7 minutes. And then all I have to do after that is just confirm it or change it or adjust it. I'm open to adjusting, but I want to have it nailed down and everybody on the boat's on the same page. And that's important for a couple of reasons. I'll come back to that in a moment. So 6 to 10 minutes to go is our homework on the start line. Fully focused on the start line, which end's favored and by how much. You've got your line sights. Sorry, you have your ley lines through the pin and through the starboard end. So if I know that I like the right side of the race course, Sunday, I did like the right side of the race course more often than the left. We started in different places, but in general, we wanted to kind of get to the right early last Sunday. And if you know that, then you're going to try to start to the right of the pack. And usually that's going to put you on a short starting line with 8 boats. That's going to put you towards the right side. So we spent most of our real racing starts up towards that starboard end. And we did most of our homework there and we got better at it each time. So we know all that we knew all that information before the 5-minute gun even went. 4 to 7 minutes, start zones confirmed. We have our ley lines. We've done 1 or 2 accelerations in the conditions that we're in. Remember, when you do these at the start line if it's 50 boats or 100 boats, it's now super choppy air and super choppy water. So whatever your backstay setting was halfway up the beat last time you tuned, ease it off about 6 inches, right? Ease it off to your light air settings because the boats are chopping up the water, they're chopping up the air. So think about that off the first couple minutes of your start. But the boat's all set. Your start zone's confirmed. You've got your transits. You've pinged both ends if you like to do that kind of a thing. 2 to 4 minutes, you're already into your pre-prowl. And now you're into your technique that we were just talking about. 2 to 4 minutes, 3 minutes, we're jibing. We're just past we're left of the pin. We're jibing and we're coming back on port tack. And then of course, from there on, we go through our procedure. That last, 1 to 1.5, 2 minutes, we're positioning for our final tack onto starboard. The last one, now we're in our final acceleration, if you will. Full focus is time and distance and managing the boats around us. So we break it down in these little mini chapters, bite-sized pieces, and you only have to focus on one of them at a time. That's the beauty of it. So that kind of covers everything I wanted to cover has now been covered. And what I mean by that is I provided everybody with an example of a checklist. You can come up with your own, and I would encourage you to come up with your own. And next time you head out for a serious day of racing, have some little list taped up there on the cockpit. Have somebody responsible for it. Task somebody with managing that to keep you on track. And the J24 on Keith Whittemore's boat, he always had somebody responsible for that checklist. As silly as it sounds, it's a critical job. And once you get talking about strategy, you put a bunch of people together talking about sailboat racing 10 minutes before start, and before they know it, there's the 5-minute gun, and you haven't finished your homework because you didn't stay on schedule. So the Seahawks receivers talk about staying on schedule, and that's the kind of thing it is just being mentally disciplined and regimented enough to make sure that you're just getting done what has to get done, so you have everything you need when you need it. And that's kind of to me, those are just the very simple nuts and bolts. Those aren't secrets. That's just the hard work that goes into every start that a really good team that wants to continue to get better will do every time, and will get better very quickly. So with that, let me give everybody a chance to ask any questions, because I've been talking for a very long time and I need some wine over here. So questions, anybody?
Well, I would like to ask a question, Ron. And it's thank you so much for that. And obviously, you've timed it precisely 60 minutes after you took the mic.
I'll stick around for all your questions, I promise. I can't hear you.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, you're back. Go ahead. Ask the question again, please.
Okay. Well, just one recommendation is 6 minutes before the race start to double check, or maybe 10 minutes, to make sure that you're actually on the frequency of the race committee.
That sounds like the voice of experience. Is there a story you'd like to share with us, for us?
It's all good for those the question I have is the jib. You're mentioning full speed and light air, half speed and heavy air. Oftentimes, including you, I see you rolling the jib out very late in the game. What's your tip as far as when you actually roll out the jib and when you go full sails? Light air, heavy air.
Mm-hmm. So in light air, almost never is the jib rolled up for me on a J70 in light air or any boat. I want the jib out. I want all the horsepower available to me at any given moment. And if there's the jib doesn't always unroll perfectly, and sometimes on some boats, the further line can get snagged, the spinnaker hire can get wrapped up in it. I mean, there's so many different things that can go wrong. It's just one less thing to go wrong. I suppose I'll roll it up if we're in a tight situation and I feel like we have plenty of speed, or we're already very close to the line, and I feel like visibility and a quiet boat are going to be more important. In other words, maximizing communication and visibility around us so that I can communicate with the driver and make sure that we are exactly on the same page, because the last thing I want to happen in close proximity, if I'm going to put a boat in a tight position, is to touch another boat or have a miscommunication, which can happen when the jib's out flapping loudly. So on the J70, I'll leave it out there, and usually it's going to be full. In light air, I'm going to be using the horsepower. It's pretty rare that I am somewhere I don't want to be in light air and I'm trying to slow down. In medium and heavy air, I might leave it rolled up a little longer. But those are so there are entire articles on when you should roll your jib up and when you should unroll it in high performance boats like J70s. Entire articles, and they're great articles written by very good sailors and coaches. What I will tell you is try to do enough of these and figure out what works for you. A lot of people really value the visibility. Being able to see other boats is really important. whether you're on port tack on your port approach or whether you're on final approach. So I think that's a tough question. We tried it a couple different ways across those 15 or so starts that we enjoyed last Sunday. In general, I like to have the jib out. I remember specifically rolling it up once in a breezier start towards the end of the day because I brought us to the line too quick and too early. And I wanted to make sure that we could shoot the boat all the way upwind. And I knew it was going to be flapping for a long time because we really had to slow the boat down and glide to weather as far as we could. Okay. Does that make sense? So it's not a straightforward response.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I'm happy to hear any other questions. Otherwise, we can talk a little about some other things, including the rules.
How about big fleet starts? Any
Yes.
key for big fleet starting?
Yes. So the question, Jeff, was how about big fleet starts? What would I recommend for big fleet starts?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. So those are my favorite kind of starts. If you show me 100+ boats and I get that much happier than I normally am. So if it's really breezy, if it's really windy, anything more than say 15, 18 knots when other boats are struggling to maintain control. And often if I'm worried about other boats, let's say Martin 242s, if we had 50 of them and it was breezy enough and choppy enough that some of the less experienced drivers were having trouble holding their lane before the start and were sliding to leeward pretty quickly, that to me is the perfect time to execute or deploy the high slow speed build. That and windier, and that is my favorite start because I will be the boat that will not slide sideways as much as anybody else. To have added grip on the keel and the rudder pre-start is a tremendous advantage. It's a gift, and it's yours for the taking if you take the time to just try a couple of starts like that. I would strongly encourage that kind of a start, and you can even do that. I sort of blend every start with the port approach start that you heard me talk a lot about tonight, where I'll still approach that position from the port side. I just might do it a minute earlier. So I'm tacking onto starboard for my high slow speed build, maybe at 2 minutes or 2.5 minutes instead of 1 or 1.5 minutes. That's kind of why I use the range and times. That's a great question. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, just have to find your lane and establish your speed.
Yeah. I think that especially in a boat like a Martin or a J70, when it's breeze on and you're overpowered, in fact, anytime that when you go from stopped to a full acceleration and the boat kind of violently slides to leeward or lurches to leeward a little bit, that's a great opportunity to try the high slow speed build because you eliminate that from the entire equation. You effectively gain in a J24, you gain 1.5 bolt lengths to windward of anybody around you. And all you have to be careful of is remembering that and not setting up too close to leeward of anybody to windward of you, because if they're not doing something similar, they're liable to slide into you. Even though the rules say they have to keep clear, they're going to have a hard time doing it. That's how big and dramatic the difference is. It's a real weapon. The windier it gets, the more I'm leaning towards integrating the high slow speed build on my final approach. Great question.
Thanks.
Hey, Ron.
Yes.
On your acceleration toolkit on your final, when you're on starboard, approaching the line, what are you thinking about for the J70?
Great question, Chris. So let's see. So last Sunday, you know what, I'll tell you, it depends if I'm driving or if I'm crewing. Because if I'm crewing as I was last Sunday with Mike, we've sailed together before, we work well together, but it's harder for me to articulate just how low I would like the driver to turn the bow in order to accelerate. You know what I mean by that? So the windier it gets, again, I'll default as early as I can in the game up the wind range, maybe as early as 12 knots. I mean, we did it once or twice. I think we did 2 of the high slow speed builds, and they worked pretty sweet on Sunday because it takes that out of the equation. accelerating a boat's a really challenging thing, and trying to do it better than not just the boat on either side of you, but maybe 50 or 100 boats is tremendously challenging. So I think that if you can eliminate that, that's a big gain. So think about how much of it's going to be high, slow speed build. And I think here's the part of the question I'm having a hard time answering is how much space to leeward? How have I set myself up for that particular start? Do I have a couple lengths of runway to go forward? Do I have a boat length to leeward as I would like to have, that I can put my bow down? So those are the things that I kind of factor in. If I have a very slim, if it's one of those starts where Kai comes in tight to leeward, and if I don't do a great job, I know he's going to work me over, then I'm always going to go for that earlier speed build, even if it's not windy, and just trim and stay high above close hauled. So at least when he accelerates, he's going to either have to accelerate before I do and stay high, or more likely, the boats around me are going to put their bow down deeper to try to make up for the time they've lost, which is typically how we all start. We wait a little too late, then we have to do this great big dive at the end to make up for it. So I'm thinking about those two factors, and that's going to that determines the words that come out of my mouth if I'm crewing to say how we're going to accelerate. So it depends on the runway you have forward, and it depends on the gap you have to leeward runway wise to accelerate. And if I have both of those things, it's just a matter of, do I want to start early and stay higher, or start a little bit later and put the bow down deeper and do a little bit deeper of a dive acceleration. But all those require a lot of coordination between the crew, the skipper and the crew. You and Justin do a really good job of that in general. Let me digress. That's a great question. That is probably the key point, that the acceleration probably loses a good position on the starting line more than any other factor out there. So I will tell you a short 90, I think I can make it in 90 seconds, a story. You probably know Tom Hughes. He's a local guy on Crane Island. He came out with us last Sunday, and his 7-year-old son Hatcher. Back in about 2005, Tom asked if I'd help him with his Etchels, and his goal was to be top 10 at the Worlds in Cowes, England. Windy, wavy, brutal place. Oh, and by the way, we were a light team. We were not a heavy team. That's a different story. But to answer your question and tie it to the story, for the whole week, we could see that it was going to be breezy, and it was going to be from a gradient direction coming down the Solent, as it often does. So the breeze was generally predictable and generally very windy, 18 to 35 the whole week. And the current during our race times was going against the wind almost the entire time we would start our first race. So the reason I mention those things is a week before the regatta, we could see the weather forecast coming together. We practiced pin. We knew a week ahead of time we were going to have to dominate the left side of the race course on the first beat of every race. So we had done our homework. But then we had to get good at starting at the pin, because I think that's one of the most difficult things to do. And at the time, Tom was not the most experienced sailor there, with lots of pro sailmakers and everybody else who won that world championship before. So we spent an extraordinary amount of our time, more than an hour a day, working on accelerating and ley line calls and ley line transits, and working with the current and studying how to start well at the pin, probably an hour a day for the week before the regatta when everybody else was off speed tuning. And we were absolutely so we owned the pin almost every single race, the entire world championship, and won the left side more often than not. Ended up the regatta in 5th when we probably should have been in the 30s, just because we worked really hard on our acceleration, and we got to know the current against the wind with the chop, and studied how the boat approaches the buoy, and just practice. So that's an extreme example of how a very average team, we were feared on the pin, and no one would even challenge us after the 3rd day of the regatta, and they gave us the pin every day. And so what I'm trying to say is that a little bit of practice, and you will be able to answer that question far better than I will without even telling any stories. So that's kind of that's my real answer is if we practice acceleration and we practice a couple different ways to do it. And those are some drills that we'll start doing as a group. I mean, now that we have, you know, eight J70s here together that are all totally inspired and game on, we'll start doing some of these things before our races and on practice days to just get really good at it. And then that transfers to any other boat and any other regatta you might be sailing. Any other questions that I can answer about that? Otherwise, I'll just quickly touch on rules.
Hey, Ron, I have a question for you. And
Yes.
First of all, thanks for doing this. It's fantastic, very much appreciated.
Nice to see you, Eric.
The question is, if you were the slow boat in the fleet, heavy displacement, full keel, how would you alter your starting strategy from what you just went through?
Brilliant question. Brilliant. The part I mentioned about starting away from the pack is critical. So an easy way to answer that question is on any boat, doesn't have to be a Dragon, doesn't have to be a J70. If you feel like you can out accelerate or out point the boats around you, you can feel comfortable starting in the pack or to leeward of the pack. And that's generally going to work very well for you, even to the windward of the pack, anywhere near other boats, and you're going to do well. If we're at the opposite end of that spectrum, where we're a little bit lower and maybe faster, or at least generally lower, I'm going to want to give myself runway to leeward. So I'm going to start one of two different ways. I'm going to start at the starboard end. The real question is, do I want to go right or left on the beat? And the answer to that question is, if I want to go to the right, I'm going to start, first of all, I'm going to probably try to start near the committee boat. Or if the pack is near the committee boat, I'm not going to start under the pack. I'm going to go past the pack and come in late, maybe a boat length or two late, with speed and with my momentum, which in a Dragon is with a capital M. And I'm going to use that momentum to go into a high point mode around the committee boat. I'm not going to line up with the boats. I'm not going to come in barging. I'm going to be after them. I'm going to be a good 2 boat lengths behind the leaders, but I'm going to come roaring in and go above them into a very high point mode. So I can then either choose to continue on in the lane I've just created, or I can roll into a nice easy tack. And then I can own my own destiny for the next 5 minutes of the race course, which is really your goal. And that qualifies as a great start. So I would think about that. And if you have an option, if everybody starts up at the windward end, I would do, you know, Justin and Chris have done a very good example of this in the J111. When they come out and race Raku, they'll start away from the pack. And if they need to, they'll just start to leeward of the pack and foot nice and fast. Use the strength of your boat and your design relative to your competition. So those are 2 ways I would do that.
Thanks, appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. Other questions? We covered a lot of material. You guys are super patient. Okay, a couple of comments on the rules. The reason that I went to the trouble of getting permission from Zeke Horowitz, he is a North Sails, Annapolis professional sailor, very good sailor. He's a coach. He must be 30 or 31 years old. I've been coaching Zeke since he's 13 years old. I mention his name because on your sheet you printed out, there should be a link towards the bottom of that under rules. And Zeke has put together a brilliant, easygoing, if you have any alcohol left in front of you, click that link when we're done and keep watching. And they've done something very clever, and this was Zeke's idea, and that was, it's a 90-minute rules presentation, just like you'd see from Dave Perry or Dave Dellenbaugh, but maybe a little more fun, and very focused on you, the One Design sailor. He's done something clever, and that is that the whole 90-minute piece is time-stamped. Starting rules, I think, are at 17 minutes. And upwind mark roundings, Betsy had some great questions a couple weeks ago about those. Those are like at 22 or 30 minutes or something. So go below that, take a look, click on the area of the race course you want to learn the rules, and he will cover them all in about 5 or 10 minutes. You don't have to watch all 90 minutes. unless you want to learn all those rules. But he covers them just swiftly and sweetly, and he's given us permission to go ahead and print the links and share it widely. So it's a really beautiful, well done piece, and it's a whiteboard talk about the rules, and it's just about, and he clearly prioritizes what's important and useful to us and the racing that we like to do. And the rest of the 70% of the rules, they're there for you to study some other time. But anyhow, I would highly encourage you to, that's part of the reason I wanted everybody to print those out, is so you have that link. But go and watch Zeke's talk on the rules. So for me, if I have 5 hours in a day to go sailing, I want to spend about 90 seconds of it on the rules. I want to spend all the rest of that time out sailing, which is why we've set things up here at West Sound the way we have. The boats are basically rigged and ready to go in 10 minutes. You get out of work, you get to the boat, you get on the water, you go do what you love to do. Rules are guidelines, and they allow us to play a game that we love in a fair way. It's just that simple. We heard Chris White teach us how to use the latest app technology, which is fabulous. He taught us about a few of the key rules. He did a great job working us all through this, and it's all recorded there. So if you want to have Chris share with you, just go back into the OIYC site, and click on his link, and you'll see it. But I love the presentation that he did. Was fabulous. I watched every minute of it. Everybody had great questions. You can watch that about the rules. We all have to do, we have to be accountable. We all have to, it's our job to best understand and adhere to these rules of fair play. So we have to all accept that. It's a complicated game that we play with expensive equipment. And again, I'm super proud of the mutual respect and the style of sailing we've developed here on West Sound, where boats just don't touch. I love that, but I want to keep that going. It's that important to me. So I'm not interested in sorting out last year's issue of I Told You So, or playing Judge Judy with he said or she said. My life is just too short for stuff like that. If you really want to learn the rules really well, we have a couple of experts, Chris White, Zeke Horowitz, and they will share with you, and they do such a clean job of presenting. It leaves very few questions unanswered. To maximize my fun with sailing, I will never put myself in a position that compromises me or my team or my boat, or might confuse the boats around me. I will sacrifice a few feet or a couple boat lengths at that point on the race course if it means avoiding a gray area in the rules. So that's my personal style. Everybody's different. But I want us all to kind of understand, I feel like our fleet has a really great vibe here, and I want us to maintain that. And I think we can. So I would encourage everyone to click on that rules link and go watch any portion of it that works for you. You don't want to win the Golden Fender Award, I promise. We will give it in fun to someone who has had a bad day or made some bad choices. I would encourage that maybe you don't want that to be you. You certainly don't want to be the first recipient of it. So just stay heads up and stay clean. And if you have an issue on the race course, in my view, yes, we should all learn the rules. We should all sail by the rules. We should never weaponize the rules. Match racing is a different game. Team racing is a different game. Unless you're engaged in that kind of play, this isn't you don't need to have your PhD in rules to be able to go and enjoy the game of sailboat racing. So I just kind of wanted to share some of those thoughts with you guys, because it's important to me that we continue to build on and preserve what we've started here. And we've got something really special, and it's because of the people, and a lot of you are here right now. So I wish to thank you all for that. And I will stay on and answer questions as long as anybody wants, or talk sailing, or answer anything you want. But otherwise, I will let everybody go and enjoy the rest of their Wednesday night. And we'll look forward to sailing on Sunday, I hope. So thank you all. And I will stay here if anybody wants to chat about anything.
Thank you, Ron.
Thanks, Ron.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, Ron. Appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Thanks, Ron.
Thanks,
That was
Ron.
great. That was really good.
Yeah, well done. Very informative. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Ron. Take
Yeah.
care, guys.
You guys are long. You guys are good. You stuck around for a long, long time. Thank you. Anything on anybody's mind?
I know Stephanie would love to close down the meeting. She's driving in the car on their way down to the ferry. So, Steph, if you're there and you're able to unmute, great. There you go.
Yep.
Ken, thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, everybody, for attending tonight. We'll get the video posted onto the website, and I'll let you know when that's done, and the handout as well if you didn't get it in last Monday's night's email. Thanks again, Ron. Very, very informative. Everybody have a great evening.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Thanks, Steph.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, Ryan.